Hi, soul friends. It's Tannaz Hosseinpour, and welcome back to another episode of the Minutes on Growth podcast. Today, we have a very special guest with us, and you're going to figure out why very shortly. Her name is Kathryn Spears. She is a neurosomatic intelligence practitioner, and she's the director of marketing and communications at Neurosomatic Intelligence, the leading global institute of neurosomatics. Welcome, Kathryn.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to dive deep into our topics for today because I have been working as a relationship coach for 8 years and, went back to school 3 years ago for counseling psychotherapy. And over the years, I've realized the how important and vital nervous system regulation is for the health of our relationships with ourselves and with others, and how vital incorporating the somatic aspect of healing is for our mind, body, soul. So when I saw, your bio, I was like, I need to have her on. We need to talk about this. It's not talked about as much as I'd like it to be. So let's dive right in if you're open to it.
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Let's do it.
I want your take on it. Why is nervous system regulation so important to the foundation of healing, sustainable change, leadership?
Truly, the nervous system runs the entire show. The nervous system's number one job is survival. It is to keep us safe and to keep us alive. And that is both perceived and real threat. Our brain is a predictive mechanism. And so it's really working based on lived experience, our own internal bias, and so much of our developmental years. And so even in present day, when we want to, do something extraordinary, like me showing up on a podcast as an example, it can read as a threat to our nervous system. And that's again perceived threat based on past experiences. That's really trying to keep us safe. So that will do anything. Our nervous system will do anything to keep us safe. And that's when we start to see those things come in, like procrastination or inner critic or imposter syndrome. And those are all survival responses from our nervous system trying to protect us and keep us safe, even though, you know, I always say like it's operating in 2025 on a mixtape from 1992. And that's exactly what's happening, right? It's going based on a past experience that it thinks is happening in present time when really that's not the case. And so giving our brain and our nervous system and our body, in an integrated way, this signal of safety that's calibrated to our own nervous system that's like, hey, okay, we're safe because it doesn't speak English. That's when the real shifts start to happen because we're able to get our operating system, the system that's calling the shots before we can even think about what we want to do, on board and aligned with what we want.
I love it. And it sounds so different to what we've heard, right? So, for let's say the past couple of decades, but mostly with the rise in social media and the content that's out there of like mindset shift, mindset shift, mindset shift, shift your thoughts, break the negative loop. And for sure, that plays a big role in the way we're experiencing life. But mindset work alone isn't enough, right?
That's right. And if we even look at studies, mindset is really 5%.
Hmm.
The subconscious is running 95% of our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And that's why it's so critical that we start by working with our nervous system because it is making the decision before it gets up into our logical, cognitive, higher order thinking brain and the prefrontal cortex. And that's just, it's our gatekeeper. And it's preserving energy by doing this. And that's why mindset isn't enough, right? Because we could be falling into a loop or a pattern subconsciously as a protective output before we actually have, the opportunity to outthink or out mindset what's really going on.
Can you give me an example to kind of put this theory into perspective, maybe pulling an example from an early childhood experience and how that pattern can, replay in our adult life and how that nervous system dysregulation is running the show.
Oh, absolutely. One that's deeply personal for me. I touched on earlier showing up on a podcast as being like really threatening for my nervous system. And that's because of visibility for me. What I realized as I started to do my nervous system work was a massive threat. And the root of this is really stemming from my childhood and moving around. So we moved more than 18 times before I turned 20. So I was the new kid in town and an easy target for bullying. And so I was really badly bullied throughout my entire childhood. And so for me, the best coping strategy was to be invisible, right? Like if I'm quiet, I don't make any sudden movements, I kind of stay in the background. It creates safety to not be seen and become a target for bullying. And so that was a protective function. And so then when I, really started to build my own business and want to really amplify and share my mission, I was noticing these outputs come into play where I would like want to do the thing and then it wouldn't happen. Or I'd want to put this offer out there, or I'd want to speak on a podcast, or I'd want to share my content consistently, or go on an Instagram live. And I was making every excuse. And then I realized that those excuses were actually protecting me, but based on an old narrative. So I had to retrain my brain, body, and nervous system that we weren't, in fact, on the schoolyard in grade 3, running from the portable to the main room when I got, shoved down and laughed at and called names, that I was Kathryn in 2025 and really, truly, from the deepest, darkest depths of my soul, wanted to share my mission with ease and with confidence to have an impact. And so that really started to play out in present day based on a past experience. I see this a lot too with people pleasing, right? And people pleasing really comes from staying attached to a parent. That's our survival, like having that attachment to our caregiver. And then it continuing to play out to stay socially attached because as humans, like we need connection. And that playing out in present day as well. So those are two really common themes that I see in the people that I work with.
Wow, thank you for that vulnerable share.
Thank you. Yeah.
It's so profound when we, put these theories, give a different perspective to them. And it's so relatable as you were sharing. And I'm sure the audience can relate to parts of that story or maybe even all of it. So you realize that, okay, something is stopping you from living your truth in the present moment. And that's the pattern and how your nervous system is perceiving this space and this vision. How did you rewire it? How did you rewire it into safety?
So, first and foremost, I read all the books and I did all the things and I tried the mindset and I also really tried to meditate. And let me tell you, that was just a no, that was a no-fly zone for me for a really long time. And what ended up happening was this like deep internal sense of shame. Like there must be something wrong with me because the internet is telling me like I need to sit in stillness. And to do that made me feel completely unraveled. And that's when I found neurosomatics. And that's really finding tools in the inputs. And so our gatekeepers for the information coming in, when we're bringing in information every millisecond, the gatekeepers are our 6 primary subconscious systems, and they're deciding safe or unsafe. And so, by working at a minimum effective dose within those brain based areas, I was able to start to create safety at a physiological level that created capacity and reduced the perceived threat in my system, which then helped to create clarity in the information coming in and reduce overall threat. The other piece was repatterning real time And so finding what are called high payoff tools, which are calibrated to an individual system based on measurement. So inputs in those systems, those six, so it's visual, vestibular, respiratory, to name a few, and finding the inputs that gave me that immediate like and beyond the feeling. So we would measure through like range of motion, tone of voice, respiration, so that it wasn't always bias in how we should feel. I'm not sure if anyone's ever sat in therapy and they're like, so how are you feeling? You must be feeling better since the last time we spoke. And you're like, oh, right, I must say I'm feeling better, right? And then you go into that fawn, that people pleasing response.
Mhm.
So we include feelings while also measuring the subconscious through those like subtle range of motion. So I would use those tools real time to be able to indicate safety. And
Mhm.
that's really the language of the nervous system, is really understanding like, okay, what can I signal? What can I use to signal safety at a nervous system level, at a physiological level that creates capacity and safety for my nervous system in a language that it understands? So that in that moment when it feels threat, I can be like, hey, no, we're good, without speaking in English, because unfortunately it doesn't speak English.
I love that. So personalizing it to you and what your body responds to and perceives as safety. Can you give us a few examples of what is in that toolbox of yours?
Yeah, so respiration is a big one. We really, as a society, have become mouth breathers, the rise of sleep apnea, cardiovascular disease. And so, really retraining the respiration system, because a lot of us don't realize that we are chronically hyperventilating, which shows up as like anxiety, brain fog, fatigue. So, doing something as simple as straw breathing, so breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth in a slow, controlled, methodical way, was a tool that I really relied on a lot.
Mhm.
Also, proprioceptive mapping, especially for dissociative people. So, if you're moving into a dissociation, really creating clarity in the proprioceptive map. So, that's our 3D map of our body and our brain. And just mapping on scars, mapping on tattoos, or mapping on your ankles or feet,
Mhm.
those small bones, just with a little bit of sensory stimulus or even to the diaphragm, creates a huge boost of safety, because if we know where our proprioceptive map is in space, then it gives us an incredible sense of safety from a nervous system perspective, because we need to know where we are in space to be able to move without risking falling or injuring ourselves. So those would be like my two go-to. But there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tools that we recalibrate, even in the visual system, like a visual reset, to help with cranial nerves, or working in the cranial nerves to actually change neuroplasticity. It's really cool stuff.
What didn't work for you that has been, let's say, popularized in society?
For me personally, like meditation and therapy were really those like mainstream, or breath work, like go do
Mhm.
these things. And for me, I really identified as like a high achieving, overachieving, like type A certified hustler in my past life. And so the busyness was the coping mechanism, right? Because to slow down and to actually like sit with my own feelings and thoughts was too much of a threat for my nervous system. And then the result of that was moving into another stress response, be it freeze, flight. Um, and so now, with the minimum effective dose, being able to slowly reintegrate those things into my practice with safety, I'm able to do those things. And so it's just really recognizing, like, hey, just because somebody on the internet says do this and it doesn't work for you, that's not a you problem, and that's okay. I tell everyone I work with, like, there's nothing wrong with you. You don't need to be fixed. We just need to find the right tools to break through your own nervous system. And there's so many things out there that are, these peak somatic experiences where we're throwing ourselves into a really big stress response unintentionally, and we're doing the opposite of what we intended to do. And for me, therapy was that, like going to therapy and talking about it. And then I would leave and be like, oh my gosh, I don't really remember much of that because it threw me into my own stress response. So I flighted, or I people pleased in the moment and then would re traumatize myself by talking through it because it was too much, too soon, too fast. And so that's where that minimum effective dose really comes into play. And I kind of use like going to the gym or running a marathon as an example, or even starting any sort of medication, right? Like it's not a one size fits all approach. And so being able to assess and reassess our own nervous system and how we're responding to these things is just so pivotal because that's how we break through without pushing past our plateau and then ending up in another stress response when we're trying to repattern that.
I really love this because it kind of hits on this idea of, we see content on social media and um we don't take in this idea that okay, there's nuances to everything and our blueprints are different, so our toolkit is going to look different. And especially for high achieving women who are able to handle the big mental load that they're carrying all the time, right? And they have this belief that I should be able to handle this. I should be able to handle that. And she's a mom, she's a CEO, she's handling
Mhm.
her husband's doctor's appointments, just a lot of
All of the things.
everything. She's everything and everyone to everyone. Uh,
Mhm.
what's happening to the brain and the body that keeps them stuck in this survival mode of I should be able to handle the stress better and then getting mad at themselves that they can't.
That is exactly the stress response. Like that is the maladaptive pattern. And these are the women that I work with because I too was that woman. And, I will still catch myself moving into those patterns. The difference is I have now the agency to choose, right? And it's not just taking over and I'm like, I have to do this and there needs to be more. And we're constantly raising the bar over and over again while also depleting ourselves in all of the ways. And that's the other thing that I loved about this. A, it was measurable, which for high achieving women, we kind of want to have that measurement. In my past life, when I was working in fast paced startups, it was like, well, what's the ROI? So having that measurement really helped me to tangibly see the changes and differences because our brain is protective, right? So it's going to kind of start to trick us into, is it really changing, right? Like those creeping responses will start to come in.
Mhm.
And then the other piece is how integrative this is into everyday life, meaning like it's a millisecond. Like as quick as I snap my fingers, as quickly as somebody is triggered, we can also down regulate or up regulate depending what they need in that moment in the moment, like when my 13-year-old daughter is slowly getting ready and is already 5 minutes late for the bus and I want to explode. Or when I'm having a conversation with, you know, uh, someone that I perceive as like condescending or talking down to me, and I'm feeling triggered or activated from my like own not enoughness narrative, and being able to like stay present and in that prefrontal cortex,
Mhm.
or if we're having a conversation like with a partner and we're feeling that trigger pull, right? And being able to have tools in the moment that I can deploy to stay in my logical prefrontal cortex and not move back into that survival brain where it's really hard to make decisions. We're swirling the drain over and over again. We're taking longer. It's like jumping from task to task. Everything feels like an urgent emergency. We must reply to that email right away. Like these are all a stress response in action. And what's so amazing to me is like I lived in that hustle culture for so long. And had I had these tools, then I would have been able to hustle more effectively, right? And I'm like, it's so funny because this is it, right? And it is brain-based, right? Like it's staying in the prefrontal cortex and not making decisions from scarcity or lack or an old narrative. It's really like activating that part of the brain and staying in there so that you can make clear decisions, move quickly, efficiently, and actively without depleting and draining your own energy. Because the reality is these women that are doing all the things end up coming home and have nothing left to give themselves and like starfishing in bed or like numbing out and like doom scrolling or what have you. And that doesn't feel good, like they probably have a list of feel good things they want to be doing. And so we really incorporate those things back in with safety because these women also are all or nothing, right? Like they want to do it all and then they repeat the cycle of going all in 110% and then can't keep up. And then, 4 days in, 8 days in, 2 weeks in, they feel that like exhaustion kick in, and then in comes like the self-judgment, the blame, the shame, and then like we just repeat it over and over and over again. And it doesn't have to be that way.
Doesn't have to be that way. What a comforting thought.
Yeah.
Love that. I asked your permission prior to starting this to talk about your late diagnosed ADHD.
hmm
Can you tell us a little bit about how this diagnosis came to be, what made you look into it, and how it has changed your life, if it has changed your life?
Yeah, it's definitely changed my life. I really lived my whole childhood as like fitting into this box,
Mhm.
really needing to like, even in the school system now, I see it with my own two kids. It's, like you follow the rules and you do as you're supposed to and you do as you're told. And it can take away from your own creative expression, your own self-expression, your own self-authenticity. And even looking at myself and, where my career led me, it was really based on moving from not within myself, like not tapping on my inner wisdom, but really like that external validation, right? So, like, let's get a big marketing job and be in startup and lead teams and chase the title or chase the salary. And I was like, there's got to be something more. And during COVID, I really started to self-reflect. I think that was probably a pretty pivotal time for a lot of people that was
Yeah.
like, wait a second. It was like the pause we all needed to
Yes.
recalibrate ourselves, as difficult as it was. COVID for me was really this kind of awakening.
Mhm.
And I started to understand myself more and give myself more grace. And I lived a lifetime of shame around you're lazy, you
Mhm.
know, you don't take care of yourself, which also stems from developmental years too, of fitting in that box of being the perfect child and doing the things that I'm meant to do and perform and so on and so forth, which is common for high achieving type A women. Um, and so I really started to kind of see these signs and I was like, huh, I think I'm gonna, I think I might have ADHD. And the signs were really like in that, like not following through or that continuing like loop of trying and then failing and then trying and failing, which really wasn't trying and failing. It was just like working against how my own brain worked.
Mhm.
And so having the diagnosis really kind of gave me this like, oh wow moment of everything has felt really difficult. And that's because I have to try so much harder to do things.
Mhm.
Um, and it's very common with like complex PTS, and early childhood developmental trauma. So it really connected a lot of dots for me. And then it can really go two ways. It really becomes like the identifier and you identify with that and it's like your crux. Or for me, it was like, oh, that's cool. And now like, let's crack this box wide open because we're not going to color inside of the lines or stay inside the box anymore. And learn different ways to give myself grace and work with my nervous system to start to be able to do the things that I want that I felt like either I had a narrative that was related to like my personality when really that wasn't the case. And then when I started to be able to detach that from me as a person, as a self, as like a personality trait or a character flaw, that's when things really started to open up for me because I was able to detach just like we would, detach anxiety or anything like that. And it became like something outside of me that I was in like full control of. Not in a like I must control way, but like in a way that's like, oh, I don't have to just kind of like lay down and accept this. I have agency to
Mhm.
change, to shift, and to adapt. And so yeah, that's where that all came from. And then I really started to learn about the brain and the body and how that's all integrated with the nervous system and how we respond and how we show up. And then here I am.
I love that. So empowering. Um, so if we were to, I mean, it's hard because you have like wealth of wisdom, you've shared so much, but if we were to like kind of summarize what you shared with us, it is that we can we do have a choice. We can have a choice on how we respond to life if we understand how our brain works and how our nervous system works and take the time to learn about a personalized toolkit that we can use to shift the way we're experiencing reality and break free from um, patterns and cycles that aren't serving us.
Yes, that's exactly it. And I mean, I said at the beginning, 5% is mindset, and then the other 95% is that subconscious
Mhm.
loop that's happening before we're even conscious. So if we're working within that 95%, the impact is going to be so much more substantial. And then add in the layer of precision to you, right? Knowing, hey, this is actually working for me and signaling safety to my nervous system so that I can actually repattern and reprogram, that belief. Beliefs live in our subconscious. They're there as protective outputs and neurotags. And by being able to start to create capacity at a physiological level, we can see them more. We have more opportunity to shift them and expand our level of consciousness and really grow at a profound rate that's sustainable.
Mm, that's sustainable. That's the golden
That's
part.
sustainable. That is sustainable. And I always say before, I always did it while abandoning myself, right? Like everyone else first, and then I'm like, in the trunk. And now that's not the case, right? It's like I don't have to abandon myself to do all of these things. And it doesn't have to be hard, it's like a 30-second tool peppered throughout the day. And yeah, it's profoundly life-changing.
Feels like a warm hug to self, like as you were sharing that.
It does. It does. It really does. And it's not this like big, we are really programmed to be like, well, then I have to do this 1 hour at the gym and this
Mm.
20-minute blah and this 60-minute whatever. And it really doesn't have to be that hard, especially when we're working in our own unique nervous system and we know exactly what it needs to be able to signal that safety and make that change. It's just, yeah, it's a game changer.
Thank you so much for sharing all of those wisdoms of like nuggets of wisdom. Whew. How can the audience connect with you, Kathryn?
Yeah, so they can find me on my website, beyondyourmindset.com. There's a free quiz on there so you can find your silent subconscious saboteurs, which is a really, really cool quiz, I have to say. And also on Instagram at kathrynspears.co.
Amazing. And I'll put that all in the show notes so people can connect with you easier. Thank you so, so, so much for coming on here, for sharing your time, your insights, your wisdom. It's been a very comforting, empowering, expansive conversation for me. And I hope the audience feels the same way too. I don't know, it's just like it's very hopeful. It felt very hopeful. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a great conversation.
Thank you everyone for listening. Speak soon.